Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of season 2 on how to transition from corporate to a virtual assistant. In this episode, we're going to talk about your freelancing essentials, which are your tools, your contracts, and your system. On our previous episode 4, we talked about how to create your online portfolio, even if you've never had an experience as a VA or never had any working experience at all. If you want to watch that, check the description down below, or you can hit any of the links on the screen. If you want to watch everything from season 1, wherein we teach you how to start becoming a virtual assistant, then you can head on our description as well. Before we dive into today's episode, let me first introduce myself, especially if this is your first time here. My name is Mia. I am currently a training and onboarding manager, and I used to be an executive virtual assistant. I started in 2021. Prior to being a freelancer or an EVA, I've never had any experience. My experience mainly revolved around being in the call center industry as well as a wedding and events planner. So let's dive right into our topic for today. Again, that is your freelancing essentials, which are your tools, your contracts, and systems. So whether you're starting as a VA or already juggling multiple clients, this essential tools is what's going to keep your business running smoothly. Remember, as a virtual assistant, you are a business owner. You are an entrepreneur. Always put that in your mind. That's the most important mindset that you should have if you want to become a successful remote worker. So let's jump into your must-have tools as a freelancer. Now, you don't need to actually have a very fancy software, but you definitely need the right tools for your business. Let's start off with your communication tools. You have Zoom, that's for discovery calls and meetings. You also have your Slack or your Telegram or your WhatsApp. Now, these are chat or instant messaging tools. What most clients would definitely use is WhatsApp. So if you're not familiar with WhatsApp, you have to start using it now, because a lot of clients would like to send voice messages, which are very important if you are a virtual assistant. You have to actually insist or keep reminding your client to send voice messages instead of texting or emailing. Another important communications tool that I just mentioned is Slack. So this is used mostly in teams or in the corporate setting. So if you get a client who is working in a big company, then Slack might be one of the communication tools that you will start using. Another similar to Slack are Teams. It's also used as a communication tool or a chat tool. It also has video conferencing tools. But Teams is under Microsoft. You also have Google Chat, which is within the Google Workspace. So you have all of those different communication tools. Another communication tool that you should learn how to use is Loom. So this is for recording workflows or projects, or explaining to your client what you worked on, or explaining an output that you just worked on. So Loom is a very important tool so that you can easily explain things that you have done. This is also very important for a client to use. So for example, your client is going to assign a new task to you, and it needs to be explained through screen share, but you don't have time to really connect and sit down and meet with each other. You can inform your client to use Loom and explain the process, explain what they need, explain how they need you to create this output. So creating like quick 5-minute Loom videos can definitely make your communication with your client so much better. Next essential tool that you need to have are file sharing and storage tools. Now you have your Google Drive or Dropbox. So you have to familiarize yourself with Google Drive and Dropbox, because they are both not just file storage, but they are actually like a workspace already. They are like an environment wherein you can create documents. You can create databases. You can create slides. These tools are not just, again, file storage, but they are so much more than that. We can actually already use them as project management tools. So you have to make sure you know how to use them. On top of Google Drive and Dropbox, if your client is using Microsoft Office, then you have to learn how to use OneDrive, which is very similar also to Google Drive and Dropbox. Next tool are your task and project management tools. Now, this is Trello, ClickUp, Asana, Notion. These are the different project management tools that you're going to work with. But what you need to start off with, if you are somebody who's new in this virtual assistant or remote work industry, is Notion and ClickUp. Notion is very simple. It's user-friendly. It's for you to get the feel of how project management tools work. And then if you want to be a little bit more advanced and have more structure into your project management tool, you can start using ClickUp. And with ClickUp, you can also have automation. But with Notion, I think they also already have automation. So you have to familiarize yourself with these different tools. The next tool is what we want, and this is the most important tool in your arsenal, and that is your invoicing and payment gateway tools. Now, you can use different payment gateways like PayPal, Wise, Payoneer, or GCash if you have a PH-based client. Now, for you to create invoices, you can use available templates or invoice templates in Google Sheets, but you can also create your own invoicing in PayPal. I'm just not sure with Wise. I think they also have an invoicing feature wherein you can send an invoice to your client and they'll just hit on the button to send payments to you or to close that invoice. So you can automate those invoices. There are other more advanced invoicing tools. They're more on the CRM side or a project management tool, but it's something that you can discover in the future because most of them are paid tools. But PayPal, Wise, and Payoneer are a good starting point. Next, if you are more on the creative side, but sometimes even if you are an executive virtual assistant, you would do a little bit of creative stuff for your client. And the next set of tools are your design and content tools. So of course, you have Canva, which is the easiest tool to use when you want to design. Now, if you want to create slides, you can use tools such as Gamma app or Gamma.ai. This will help you create slides using AI. And of course, for videos, you have CapCut. So you have to make sure that you familiarize yourself with the basic features of these creative tools so that just in case your client needs help in editing a video or creating a content or creating a newsletter, then you can have those ready and you're familiar with them already. Bonus tools I have for you is if you need to keep track of your working hours, my favorite tool is Toggle. That's Toggl. That's toggle.com. This is very easy to use, user-friendly. It's accurate, so you can definitely use this if your client needs you to keep track of your working hours, especially if you're working on a per hourly rate contract with your client. Reminder on tools is to make sure that you explore free tools first, especially if you are a beginner. Don't invest too much on paid apps. Once you realize that this is permanent direction that you want to take, this is a business that you really want to build, then that's when you start investing on paid tools. If you also have a client that would require you to use a paid tool, make sure that you charge it to your client or ask your client to subscribe on your behalf or to use their credit cards for you to be able to subscribe in a pro version of whatever tool they would require you to use. But as much as possible, when you are beginning, just enjoy free tools and just invest in the future. Next, let's talk about contracts or independent contractor agreement. This is one of the documents or tools that you need to protect you and to also, of course, protect your client as well. Now, when it comes to contracts, here's a very important reminder. Never start working with a client without a signed contract. Take note, it should be a signed contract, and it should not be a contract that is just saved in your files or in your Google Drive. It should be signed. Later on, after I discuss what's included in your contract, I'm going to give you a list of tools that you can use to send out your contract and make sure that it is signed. Now let's talk about the important parts or the important information that you need to include in your independent contractor agreement. First, of course, is your scope of work, meaning what are your deliverables? What are your job description, or what is your job description? So for example, as an executive virtual assistant, your job description includes admin work like inbox, calendar, travel. So anything that you can do within the span of 8 hours per day or within the span of your working hours. If you are a creative, you have to make sure that your scope of work is, let's say, creating content calendar, creating videos or editing videos. So you have to make sure that you make a clear description of what you're going to deliver for your client. If your client asks you to do anything outside of your scope of work, then you have to negotiate or go back to your contract. When does it become outside of your work? For example, me, I am an executive virtual assistant. Most of my tasks focus on admin work. It's more on inbox, calendar, travel management. If my client tells me to do content or create content for her Instagram page, or aside from just creating content, I have to make sure that I grow her following. Now that's already outside of my scope, because that's what social media managers or social media marketers are doing, and that's something that I'm not good at. That is not my specialty. I can create content easily, use AI tools to create content, but I cannot manage like growth or engagement, increase engagement for their content, because it's not in my job description and it's going to take a lot more hours, and it takes expertise to do that. So I might disappoint, or definitely I'm going to disappoint my client, because that's not my niche, right? I'm not trained for that. So that's when it becomes outside of your scope. So you have to make sure that that's very clear, so that when you're, for example, that's the scenario, my client to ask me to do that. What I'm going to tell my client, this is already outside of my scope. I cannot produce this for you, or I cannot do this for you because I'm not trained for this. We need to hire somebody else. What I can do is to look for somebody who can do your content, or a social media manager or a social media marketer to produce what you want. So you have to make things clear in terms of your scope of work. And that's the reason why you have to make sure that you include that in your agreement. Next is you have to make sure when this contract ends. You have to include there that this contract is good for a year from the time that it was signed until this end of this date. So you have to make sure that the dates are clear. So for example, you start on January 1, the contract ends on December 31. Why do you need that? Because you need to make sure that you evaluate your performance after a year, and it will actually help you to get an increase in your service fee. So for example, after 1 year, the contract ends. If you would like to renew, there is a 5% or a 10% increase in the service fee. Now, why is that very important? When I was starting in this industry, a lot of people are reaching out to me and asking help to how to ask for an increase in their rate. So since this is your business, you actually don't have to ask already. You can include that in your contract, okay? Because you're a business owner. So you have to take into consideration inflation. That's why you have to make sure that you have a start and end date on your contract, so that after a year or after 6 months, you can ask for, or you can require for an increase. But this increase still can be negotiated between you and your client depending on your performance. So of course, you also have to make sure that you perform well. Next thing to include in your contract is your payment terms, meaning how much is your charge, the method of payment that your client will use, when is the due date of the invoices. When we talk about due date, you have to have an exact date on when you will send out your invoice. For example, you will send your invoice every 5th of the month for the previous month's invoice. And then they have until the 10th of each month to settle the payment. If they don't settle after the 10th, they will incur a late fee. Make sure to include the late fee in your payment terms also. This is very important because late fees will actually provide a sense of urgency for your client to make that payment. But it's also another way to build relationships with your client. For example, this is the first time that they're going to be late. Okay, they say that, oh, I'm sorry, I was very busy, I forgot, I'm going to be late. Then you can actually build more rapport and relationship with your client by saying, no worries, I'm going to waive the late payment fee for this month since I do understand where you're coming from. And this is not a regular thing that happens, right? So waiving that fee will actually build good relationships or better relationship with your client. The next thing to include in your independent contractor agreement is your PTO or paid time off. So this is something that you can negotiate with your client. So you can include, for example, you have 20 paid time offs a year. And you can also include that if it's a holiday in the US, if their office is on a holiday, you will also be on a holiday. And then you can also include, let's say, we have this local holidays in the Philippines. So these are the local holidays where I will also be on a holiday, right? So you just have to make sure that you make it clear in the contract the number of paid time offs that you will be out of the office or paid time off that you can request a leave on. So make sure also that you include like how many weeks prior to requesting for a paid time off you will ask permission from your client, right? And then what is your backup plan whenever you're going to be on a time off, right? So make sure that everything is clear in that clause. Your client can also freely negotiate with you on this, so just make sure you come up with an agreement that you are both comfortable with. Next are your revision policies or addendums. So before your contract ends, for example, your contract is for 1 year and 3 months in, your client would like to make changes in the contract or would like to add on your job description. Okay, then you create an addendum. So you have to make sure that you have that revision policy or clause in your contract stating that if there are any addendums in the contract, it should be discussed during a meeting and it should be agreed on by both parties. And the addendum will reflect a week after it was finalized or 3 days after the meeting was agreed upon or something like that. But you have to make sure that you also include your revision policy. Next is your termination clause. So if your client or you decide to end the contract prior to the termination date or the end date, then you should both agree that depending on who will end the contract or decides to end the contract, should inform the other party at least 30 days in advance or 2 weeks in advance, depending on what you agreed upon. But what I advise is make sure that it's 30 days. Why is that important? Because it's for you, for example, on your end. If the client decides to terminate your contract, you have at least 30 days to look for another client. But if you decide to end the contract, you are giving your client at least 30 days to look for your replacement, and also within that 30 days for you to train your replacement. Remember, this contract is not just protecting you, but this is also protecting your client. So it's a two-way street. We're not selfish here. No matter who's creating the contract or who's creating the independent contractor agreement, it should always be a two-way street and should benefit both parties. There are still other clauses that you should include in your contract, but the one that I discussed now are the most important parts. And these are also all mostly the clauses that a lot of remote workers or virtual assistants forget to include in their independent contractor agreement. Other clauses in the agreement that are usually really included are your NDAs or non-disclosure agreement, your security and confidentiality agreement, your governing body agreement. So those are all already included in any templated contract that you already have. So all of the things that I just discussed mostly are not included in contract templates. Now, if you're having a hard time creating your own contract, we have a lot of tools that you can already use to help you create a contract. First is Google Docs. There is a Google Doc template of a contract that you can use and just edit and include all of the clauses that I just mentioned. You can also use ChatGPT to create a contract for you. Just make sure that you have proper prompts to do so. And then once you already have a contract, you can use Google Doc Sign, if I'm not mistaken, I think, or Google Signature or Doc Signature. This is already a new feature that Google Doc has, that you can send out a Google Doc and they can already sign there. Let me see what that is. It's okay. So this feature is the e-signature. Okay. So this Google Workspace feature is what we call the e-signature. So when you create a Google Doc and you have spaces there for signatures, Google Doc will actually alert you that you can turn this into an e-signature document. So you can use that. Another tool that you can use, I've partnered with them before, is Sign Secure. So this is a Philippine-based e-signature platform. And the great thing about Sign Secure is they have notary. So if any of the party violates any terms and conditions, you can be protected by the local government. So I just don't know the exact details of how that works, but you can check out Sign Secure. I hope they can sponsor me in my future videos. Hi guys from Unawa or Sign Secure. I worked with them before and they have an amazing platform, so you can check them out as well. Next, let's talk about how to manage your invoices and your payments. So how will you manage it? Make sure that you set up your payment system early on before you onboard a client so that you can get paid on time, every time, all the time. Now, how are you going to do that? Here are some easy steps that we can do. First, decide on which platform to use. My favorite platform personally is PayPal and Wise. They are very easy to set up, very easy on the side of the client as well. Though PayPal has really high service fees, it's very easy and it's so convenient. So service fees for me are really okay. But what I do is when I ask my client if they are more comfortable in using PayPal, I'm going to charge them an additional for the service fee. So it's just an agreement between you and your client. And then you also have Wise, which I believe they have lower service fee or transaction fees with compared to PayPal. So you can check that out as well. And then we also have Payoneer. That's the first platform that I used when I started out. But I think right now, based on also feedback from other remote workers, PayPal and Wise are one of the best ones to use. Next is to create professional invoices. Now, if like me, you're using PayPal, PayPal already has an invoicing feature. Wise, I believe, also has an invoicing feature. But if you don't want to use any of their invoicing features, you can use Google Sheets. They have a template for an invoice. That's what I use. Very easy to use. There's nothing else actually that I can advise you to use because Google Sheets can automatically compute with the formulas. So Google Sheets is the best way to go when you'd like to use an invoicing feature. Now, what to include in your invoice? Make sure that you have your invoice number and make sure that you have a separate sheet with a tracker of the different invoice numbers that you have, your name and your business name and the address of your business. Your client details should also be included as well as the address of your client. The description of your services should be included there as well as the total amount and the due date. What you can also include are your payment gateways like PayPal or your bank account or Wise. So you have to make sure all of those information are already in your invoice. Next is to also make sure that you send out your invoice on time. If your contract states that you'll be sending out your invoice every 5th of the month, make sure that you send it out every 5th of the month so that there's no reason for your client to say that, hey, you sent your invoice late, so I'm gonna pay you late. Okay? Make sure that you send out your invoice. This is actually one of my weaknesses. I rarely send out invoices on time. I don't know, for some weird reason, I really have a hard time sending out invoices. Like, I feel like I don't want to charge you. But no, don't do that. Don't be like me. Next is let's talk about how to organize your workflow efficiently. Now, as a freelancer or as a virtual assistant, you're your own project manager. You're your own boss. Remember, I keep saying you are your business owner. So systems are very important. One of my favorite content creators here, she's the owner of Kohi Club or Kohi Socials, Andrea Sumida. She always talks about systems. I love listening to her content because she always talks about systems. I learned so much from her. So, what are the tools that you can use to create your own system? My favorite tool is ClickUp. That's where I automate everything. I pay and subscribe to ClickUp Pro. That's where I automate all of my projects, my timelines. Everything is in ClickUp. I also use Notion, especially for client portals. So instead of creating a website and so on, I just use the free version of Notion. But take note, I did not create that. My very good friend, Mark Inchong, created my client portals for me using Notion. He is very amazing. So if you also want help in creating your client portals, because you're not a creative like me, I really can't start creating Notion pages from scratch. You can hit up Mark Inchong. I'm going to post all of his socials in the description down below, so you can ask help and hire him to start creating Notion pages or workspaces for you. He's not just creating client portals, but he can create systems and automations within Notion to help your business. So check him out. There are a lot of different ways that you can create systems in these project management tools that I created. But to keep your dashboard simple, what you can first include in your workspaces or your project management tools are, of course, all of the things that you're going to do, like your to-do list, all of your invoices and if they are paid or not, notes from your client meetings. Make sure that you start using Fathom or Fireflies, and any deadlines and priorities. Okay, so you can use, for example, whether it's in Notion or ClickUp, you can use Kanban or Board View as your task journal or your task management tool. So make it just simple at the start so you don't waste too much time just creating your dashboard. And then make sure that you create a routine, daily or weekly routine. Like every Sunday, you plan your week, and then daily you check your calendar, you check your to-do list, and then at the end of the week, you check what you've already completed. Midweek, you also check how your progress is going so that you have that routine on top of the system that you already created. So we covered so much today. If you want to see a summary of all of the tools that I've just talked about, everything will be in the description down below. So again, what have we covered? We've covered your essential tools, how to protect yourself with your contracts and your independent contractor agreement, how to send invoices, and how to organize your workflow using project management tools. Now, I want to hear from you. What is your favorite freelancing tool? Make sure that you drop it in the comment section so that everyone can see, and you can share your best practices and your favorite tools so that all of the other freelancers, aspiring freelancers, or virtual assistants can not just learn from me, but they can also learn from you. So hit that comment section down below. If you like this video and you learned so much from this video, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel as well so that you will get more videos every Thursday, because I post every Thursday. We also have an upcoming podcast. We're just shooting the podcast videos, but we have an upcoming podcast soon. So make sure that you subscribe so that you will be alerted once that podcast is already up, and new videos are also up every Thursday. So thank you everyone for watching. This is Mia. I'll see you again on our next video. Enjoy your day!